Okay, Hare Krishna, and welcome for our reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrta. We are halfway through chapter 4, and our bold ambition is to finish chapter 4 today, this evening. We'll see how we get on, but we'll start by chanting Mangala Charanam, like we usually do, and then we can begin our reading, and then if we have time at the end and anyone would like to, we can share our reflections and so on like usual. So great. We'll begin. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrindavanusute Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. You can say Srila Prabhupada's pranams. Try and get his blessings to hear his transcendental pastimes. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschachade Jatarine. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Okay, so we're here with chapter 4, and the chapter is entitled How Shall I Serve You? And we've been hearing about Srila Prabhupada's developing relationship with his spiritual master. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta condemned temple proprietors who made a business of showing the deity for a living. To be a sweeper in the street was more honorable, he said. He coined a Bengali phrase, Shalagram Dwara Badam Banga. The priests are taking the Shalagram deity as a stone for cracking nuts. In other words, if a person shows the Shalagram form of the Lord or any form of the deity simply with a view to make money, then he is seeing the deity not as the Lord, but as a stone, a means for earning his livelihood. Abai had the opportunity to see his spiritual master deal with the nationalist Subhas Chandra Bose, who had been Abai's schoolmate at Scottish Churches College. Bose had come in a somewhat critical mood, concerned about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's recruiting young men into religious life. Srila Prabhupada, Subhas Chandra Bose, came to my Guru Maharaj and said, "So many people you have captured. They are doing nothing for nationalism. My Guru Maharaj replied, well, for your national propaganda, you require very strong men, but these people are very weak. You can see they are very skinny. So don't put your glance upon them. Let them eat something and chant Hare Krishna. In this way, he avoided him. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta used to say that when the day came when high court judges were devotees of Krishna with Vaishnav tilak on their foreheads, then he would know that the mission of spreading Krishna consciousness was becoming successful. He said that Jesus Christ was a Shakti-Avesh avatar, an empowered incarnation of God. How can it be otherwise, he said. He sacrificed everything for God. In his scholarly language, he declared, the materialistic demeanor cannot possibly stretch to the transcendental autocrat. But sometimes in speech, he phrased it in a more down-to-earth way. The mundane scholars who are trying to understand the Supreme Lord by their senses and mental speculation are like a person trying to taste the honey in a bottle by licking the outside of the bottle. Philosophy without religion, he said, is dry speculation. And religion without philosophy is sentiment and sometimes fanaticism. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said that the whole world was simply a society of cheaters and cheated. He gave the example that loose women often visit certain holy places in India with the idea of seducing the sadhus, thinking that to have a child by a sadhu is prestigious, and immoral men dress themselves as sadhus, hoping to be seduced by the cheating women. His conclusion, a person should aspire to leave the material world and go back to Godhead, because this material world is not a fit place for a gentleman. Abai saw that when disciples asked his spiritual master about something in the future, he never replied, yes, it is going to happen, or yes, we are going to do it. Rather, he would say, yes, if Krishna desires, it may be. Although in his younger years he had been an astrologer and able to predict the future, he had given it up. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was a lifetime brahmachari and was very strict about avoiding association with women. Once Abai was sitting with his spiritual master when another disciple was present, along with his young wife. The wife asked Srila Bhaktisiddhanta if she might speak with him privately, but he replied, no, whatever it is, you can ask here. I cannot see you in private. Abai was impressed by this since Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was in his 60s and the girl could have been his granddaughter. Regardless, he would not speak with any woman alone. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta liked to make his disciples into sannyasis. But one day, one of his sannyas disciples was forcibly dragged away by his wife. In tears, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta lamented that he was unable to save that soul. Yet he did not speak disparagingly of Krishna-conscious family life. Quote, I would have sex hundreds of times if I thought that I could raise Krishna-conscious children. He would send his brahmacharis out to sell the Gaudiya Math magazine and books, and even if a brahmachari were able to sell only one or two, it would please him very much, and he would exclaim, you are so nice. In considering whether essays were worthy for publication, he would count how many times the word Krishna or Chaitanya had been used. If these holy names had been quoted sufficiently, he would say, that's all right, this can be used. He would say in Bengali, Pran achaya se hetu pracha. A person must have life to be a preacher. A dead man cannot preach. When some of his preachers who had gone to chant and speak reported that no one had attended their meeting, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta replied, that doesn't matter. The four walls will hear you. That is sufficient. Don't be disappointed. Go on chanting. And in commenting on the fact that some of his disciples had fallen away, some of the soldiers will die, he said. But he did not want his disciples to lead an easygoing life. He once criticized a disciple as being ease-loving, nor should they attempt to practice austerities in seclusion. He would sing a song of his own composition, Dustamana Tumi Kashara Vaishnav. My dear mind, what kind of Vaishnav are you? You are chanting Hare Krishna in a solitary place, imitating the great saints, Haridas Thakur and Rupa Goswami, but your meditation is actually to think of women and money. Your mind is filled with such dirty things, so your bhajan is simply cheating. He taught that if a devotee gave up his preaching in the city in favor of solitary meditation, that was a method of cheating by imitating the great saints in hopes of getting cheap adoration from others. Therefore, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta never liked to open a branch of the Gaudiya Math in a place that was not very much populated. Abai went on listening to his spiritual master at every opportunity, but rarely did Abai put a philosophical inquiry before him. He preferred simply to listen. Srila Prabhupada: I never asked my spiritual master a question except one: how shall I serve you?
Abai Charan Dey became prominent in the pharmaceutical business. He worked well for Bose's laboratory, and other companies wanted him as their agent. He had hopes of becoming rich. Srila Prabhupada: my Guru Maharaj ordered me, you do this. But I thought, let me first of all become a rich man, then I shall do. In the beginning I was thinking, now my godbrothers have taken sannyas. They are begging from door to door. Why shall I beg? Let me earn money and start Krishna consciousness. The biggest pharmaceutical company in India, Bengal Chemical, made him an offer, but when they did not fulfill all his conditions, he turned them down, though later he regretted it. Still, there were good signs. The astrologer had predicted he would become one of India's richest men, and Dr. Kartik Bose had told his father-in-law, he's a very intelligent man. But there were also other signs. As many accounts as he had secured by his wide travels, there were also that many bills to collect. Many of the accounts began to fall behind in their payments, and the accumulated debt began to grow until he owed Bose's laboratory a total of 10,000 rupees. And Abai had enemies. The manager who had taken over Abai's old position as office manager with Bose's laboratory in Calcutta tried to turn Dr. Bose against Abai, insinuating that he was too independent. They had heard of his negotiating with Bengal Chemical, and the new manager attributed the accumulating debt to Abai's lack of loyalty to the Home Office. Kartik Bose remained favorably inclined towards Abai, but when the debt became a financial strain, he went to Allahabad to investigate. At Prayag Pharmacy, he spoke with Dr. Ghosh, who told him, he is a very honest man. It is no fault of his. In good faith, he gave all these chemists drugs and credit, but he can't realize the money. All right, Dr. Bose said, but I can't go on giving him money. Abai went over the accounts with Dr. Kartik Bose, and they both agreed that the best way to settle the matter was for Dr. Bose to take over the Prayag Pharmacy and all of Abai's accounts. Thus, Abai was absolved of debt, but unemployed. Atulananda Brahmachari approached him. Why don't you come to the mat? Now you are free. Abai began to visit more frequently the nearby Rupa Goswami mat, where the Gaudiya men, in their renounced brahmachari spirit, suggested that he depend completely on Krishna, give up the world, move in with them, and become a full-time preacher. But for Abai, there was no question of abandoning his business. If he did, what would happen to his wife and children? He and Radharani now had a third child, a son, so the financial responsibility was increasing. The brahmacharis were well-intentioned in asking him to renounce the world, and it was fine for them to do so, but Abai couldn't take it very seriously. Without work, he was in a critical situation, but he remained confident and eager to take on new employment. There were other companies that would like to have him as their agent, and some of his old customers wanted him to service them even if he weren't a Bose's man. Abai thought about starting his own pharmaceutical laboratory. Finally, he decided he would start his own factory, but in a much bigger city than Allahabad. he settled on Bombay. He decided that his family should remain in Allahabad, and he and his brother would travel to Bombay, take an apartment, and survey the prospects for starting a factory there. Although Radharani was used to her husband travelling, it had never been as extended as this promised to be. Abai talked with her, explaining that his recent business loss had been the arrangement of Krishna. Now, again, to provide for his family, he would have to start a large business, and that could best be done in a major city like Bombay. But family life in Allahabad would be temporarily disrupted. He set up a very small pharmaceutical manufacturing operation there in Allahabad, put his nephew Tulsi in charge, and left for Bombay with his brother. In Bombay, Abai rented an apartment on Grant Road, and applying the knowledge he had gained as manager of Bose's laboratory, started his own pharmaceutical factory. Business was going well when a large company, Smith Institute, wanted him as their sales agent. Abai took the job, thinking that he could earn money as Smith's representative while at the same time developing his own business. He was confident of his ability to earn money in the pharmaceutical line. While travelling around Bombay on business, Abai met some members of the Gaudiya Math, Bhakti Rakshaka Sridhar Maharaj and Bhakti Saranga Goswami, senior sannyasi disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Abai recognized them as respected godbrothers, well versed in the scriptures and Vaishnava philosophy. It seemed he was destined to find his godbrothers wherever he went. Both he and the sannyasis regarded their apparently odd meeting in the city as auspicious. Like the members of the Gaudiya Math, he had met in Allahabad these preachers and no permanent centre, but they were trying to start one. On behalf of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, they were going door to door, soliciting supporters for a Bombay branch of the Gaudiya Math. Abai wanted to help. As a fellow godbrother in the service of his spiritual master, he offered them his services. Although as sannyasis they were in a superior position, in their somewhat helpless condition they looked up to Abai for help. They had been staying in a small place in Proctor Road and had found little opportunity to make important contacts. Now they formed a team, Abai introducing the sannyasis to business acquaintances and the sannyasis taking donations for the new centre. Abai Charanaravinda was good at collecting funds, and he willingly gave his time. Again his godbrothers began pulling at him to participate fully in the Gaudiya Math preaching. Srila Prabhupada: we made a party for collecting alms, Sridhar Maharaj, Goswami Maharaj and myself. I took them to some of my chemist and doctor friends, and in 2 days we collected 500 rupees. Sridhar Maharaj would speak, I would introduce, and Goswami Maharaj would canvass. So Goswami Maharaj was very much appreciated, and he began to speak highly about me. For a Babu, he is so expert. He has got so many friends, and he has collected so much. Why should he not be in charge of our mat? Why shouldn't he live with us? Why is he living separately? Abai visited the mat's quarters on Proctor Road, where he joined the devotees in Kirtan and heard them speak from the Bhagavatam at the sannyasi's request. Abai took on the responsibility of finding a more suitable place for the Bombay centre. Wherever he went in the city, he looked for likely locations, just as he had responsibilities for his wife and family in Allahabad. By dint of his initiation, he was responsibly bound to assist his godbrothers. He had to take part in the preaching, not simply struggle so that he might exist in the world of business competition. But he didn't think he could ever live like the sannyasis, no possessions, no business, sleeping on the bare floor, taking only simple meals.
If anyone else wants to read.
Okay, I can have a go. So February 25th, 1935. It was the 62nd birthday of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. At Jagannath Puri, where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was residing, the devotees observed the day with ceremony. At the small Bombay centre, the few disciples planned an evening observance and invited local people. For the occasion, Abai wrote a poem. Adore, adore ye all, the happy day, blessed than heaven, sweeter than May, when he appeared at Puri, the holy place, my Lord and Master, his divine grace. O my Master, the evangelic angel, gave us thy light, light up thy candle, struggle for existence, the human race, the only hope, his divine grace. Misled we are, all going astray, save us, Lord, our fervent pray. Wonder thy ways, to turn our face, adore thy feet, your divine grace. Forgotten Krishna, we fallen souls, paying most heavy the illusion's toll. Darkness around, all untrace, the only hope, his divine grace. Message of service thou hast brought, a healthful life, as Chaitanya wrought. Unknown to all, it's full of grace, that's your gift, your divine grace. Absolute is sentient, thou hast proved, in personal calamity thou hast moved. This gives us life, this gives us a life anew and fresh, worship thy feet, your divine grace. Had you not come, who had told the message of Krishna, forceful and bold? That's your right, you have the mace, save me a fallen, your divine grace. The line of service, as drawn by you, is pleasing and healthy, like morning dew. The oldest of all, put in new dress, miracle done, your divine grace. By Abai Charandas. Abai also composed a speech, which he read before the assembled guests and members of the Gaudiya Mat. Although his first language was Bengali, his English was clear and natural. Gentlemen, the offerings of such a homage has been arranged this evening to the Acharya Dev is not a sectarian concern, because when we speak of the fundamental principle of Guru Dev or Acharya Dev, we speak of something that is of universal application. There does not arise any question of discriminating my Guru from that of yours or anyone else's. There is only one Guru who appears in an infinity of forms to teach you, me, and all others. The Guru, or Acharya Dev, as we learn from the bona fide scriptures, delivers the message of the absolute world. I mean the transcendental abode of the absolute personality, where everything non-differentially serves the absolute truth. Like the poem, the speech was personal, but even more than the poem, it was authoritative, philosophical preaching. The godbrothers were impressed to hear Abai presenting the Vaishnava philosophy so expertly. How was it possible? Of course, it should not have come as a surprise. He had heard the Vaishnava philosophy from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, just like his godbrothers. Why should he not be able to enunciate the teachings of his spiritual master, having heard from him and having read Gita and Bhagavatam and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu? Was he not a devotee in the parampara? But until now, no one who he could preach in English so expertly. Therefore, if the absolute truth is one, about which we think there is no difference of opinion, the Guru also cannot be two. The Acharya Dev to whom we have assembled tonight to offer our humble homage is not the Guru of a sectarian institution or one out of many differing exponents of the truth. On the contrary, he is the Jagat Guru, or the Guru of all of us. The only difference is that some obey him wholeheartedly, while others do not obey him directly. The guru of whom Abai spoke, of course, was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, the representative of the original compiler of the scriptures, Vyasadeva. Abai explained how Lord Krishna had delivered transcendental knowledge to Brahma, the creator of this particular universe. From Brahma, the knowledge had descended to Narad, from Narad to Vyas, from Vyas to Madhava. Because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was presenting the Vedic knowledge as is, without any interpretation, in parampara, he was the bona fide acharya who could enlighten others with the revealed knowledge of the Vedas. Abai continued, "Gentlemen, our knowledge is so poor, our senses are so imperfect, and our sources are so limited that it is not possible for us to even have the slightest knowledge of the absolute region without surrendering ourselves at the lotus feet of Sri Vyasadeva, or his bona fide representative. This transcendental knowledge," Abai explained, "has been known in India for thousands of years, and this knowledge, although presently obscured, was India's real gift to the world. We must conclude that the darkness of the present age is not due to lack of material advancement, but that we have lost the clue to our spiritual advancement, which is the prime necessity of human life, and the criterion of the highest type of civilization. Throwing of bombs from aeroplanes is no advancement of civilization from the primitive, uncivilized way of dropping big stones on the heads of the enemies from the tops of the hills. Improvement of the art of killing our neighbours by inventing machine guns and by means of poisonous gases is certainly no advancement from primitive barbarism, priding itself on its art of killing by bows and arrows, nor does the development of a sense of pampered selfishness prove anything more than intellectual animalism. Thus, while others were yet in the womb of historical oblivion, the sages of India had developed a different kind of civilization, which enables us to know ourselves. They had discovered that we are not at all material entities, but that we are all spiritual, permanent, and non-destructible servants of the Absolute. The speech continued, describing the horrible consequences of a misspent human life, the sufferings of repeated birth and death. Again and again, Abai stressed the need to surrender to the spiritual master. He criticized empirical, mundane philosophers, godless politicians, and blind sense gratifiers. He repeatedly pointed to the soul's natural and sublime position as the servant of God and as the servant of the pure devotee of God. Abai, an initiated disciple of his spiritual master for a little more than 2 years, referring to himself as a student, continued, "Gentlemen, although we are like ignorant children in the knowledge of the transcendence, still his divine grace, my Gurudev, has kindled a small fire within us to dissipate the invincible darkness of the empirical knowledge, and we are so much so on the safe side that no amount of philosophical argument of the empiric schools of thought can deviate us an inch from the position of our eternal dependence on the lotus feet of his divine grace. And we are prepared to challenge the most erudite scholars of the Mayavad school on this vital issue, that the personality of Godhead and his transcendental sports in Goloka alone constitute the sublime information of the Vedas." He then ended his speech with an eloquent prayer of submission. "Personally, I have no hope to any direct service for the coming crores of births of the sojourn of my life, but I am confident that some day or other I shall be delivered from this mire of delusion in which I am at present so deeply sunk. Therefore, let me with all my earnestness pray at the lotus feet of my divine master to let me suffer the lot which I am destined to do for all my past misdoings, but to let me have this power of recollection that I am nothing but a tiny servant of the Almighty Absolute Godhead, realized through the unflinching mercy of my divine master. Let me, therefore, bow down at his lotus feet with all humility at my command." He submitted both the poem and the speech to the harmonist. The poem, Abai's first publication, announced him as a competent writer in English, and Swami Bhakti Pradip Tirtha, editor of the harmonist, informally dubbed Abai as Kavi, learned poet. Some of Abai's godbrothers also picked up on the name and began calling him Kavi. Most of them, even the sannyasis, were not so proficient in English, but Abai was not ordinary. They could appreciate that the poem was personal, written out of Abai's genuine worship and his joy at having accepted a genuine spiritual master. But it was also written strictly in accordance with the conclusions of the scriptures. For Abai, however, the glory of his Sri Vyas Puja homage came when the poem reached Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, and it gave him pleasure. One stanza specifically made Srila Bhaktisiddhanta so happy that he made a point of showing it to all of his guests. Absolute is sentient, thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity, thou hast moved. Somehow, in this simple couplet, Abai had captured the essence of his spiritual master's preaching against the Mayavadis, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta took it as an indication of how well Abai knew the mind of his Guru Dev. Abai was delighted when he heard that the couplet was pleasing to his spiritual master. One of Abai's godbrothers compared this verse by Abai to a verse in which Rupa Goswami had expressed the inner thinking of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and had thus moved into ecstasy. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati also found the essay pleasing, and he showed it to some of his confidential devotees. He instructed the editor of The Harmonist, whatever he writes, publish it. Take a break.
Abai thought it only natural that he should have many business enemies or competitors. It was a sign of success. But his Bombay competition caused him to lose another good chance to become wealthy. The enemy was the son of Abai's supervisor at Smith Institute. Both son and father complained to the Smith Institute executives that Abai Charan Dey was pushing goods from his own laboratory and not Smith's. By this intrigue, Abai lost his position with Smith Institute, and his supervisor placed his own son as the new agent. Abai was again on his own. While continuing to help his sannyasi godbrothers in Bombay, he found a 2-story building for rent at Golia Tank Road. Everyone agreed it would make a suitable center, and Abai arranged for the rental and for initial repairs and helped the sannyasis move in. It seemed that his endeavors for spiritual things were always successful, whereas his business efforts were consistently failing. Of course, a few business enemies were no cause for discouragement. Intrigues and losses were always part of the game, and he was still well known in the pharmaceutical business throughout India. But it wasn't so much the give and take of business that disturbed him, as his own doubts about whether this was the best way for him to serve his spiritual master. Business was good only if it could go side by side with his spiritual life. Lord Chaitanya had said that the chanting of Hare Krishna should be spread to every town and village, and Abai wanted to assist his spiritual master in fulfilling that prophecy, especially by contributing money and helping establish centers. His earnings should not go solely for his family. Ideally, family life and spiritual life should progress side by side, but the difficulty was Abai's wife. She was disturbed over the business losses and apathetic to the spiritual successes. She wanted to stay within the orbit of home and family, and despite Abai's suggestions, she refused to accept initiation from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. It was his own wife who was his most formidable competitor, and she waged her opposition right in the home, where it was least welcome. When Abai occasionally visited his family in Allahabad, he tried to satisfy them with his good intentions. Business had not gone so well in Bombay, but he had new plans, and he assured his family that there was no need to worry. He planned to do more preaching in his home. The whole family could become more involved in spiritual activities. He wanted to invite guests, hold discussions on Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, perform kirtan, distribute prasadam. He wanted to preach just as his spiritual master and godbrothers were preaching. Such a program wouldn't require that a sannyasi or brahmachari come and preside. Abai could do it himself. This would be an example of the ideal household life. But Radharani was unsubmissive. Rather than coming to hear him speak, she stayed with the children in another room, taking tea. In Bombay, Abai associated with Sridhar Maharaj and Bhakti Saranga Goswami. Both sannyasis were highly literate scholars. Sridhar Maharaj was respected for his erudition in the Shastras, and Bhakti Saranga Goswami for his writing and preaching in English. Sometimes Abai would discuss his realizations with them. Abai also studied the scriptures on his own, his spiritual master's commentary on the Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, as well as commentaries by the previous acharyas. While reading Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, 41st verse, he read that the disciple should consider the order of the spiritual master to be his life and soul. These words produced a deep effect on Abai, strengthening his desire to execute Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's command. And in the 88th chapter of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he came upon a verse in which Lord Krishna said something that startled him. Yasyaham anugranami harisye tadanam sanai tatodanam tyajantyasya swajana dukhadukitam. When I feel especially mercifully disposed towards someone, I gradually take away all his material possessions. His friends and relatives then reject this poverty-stricken and most wretched fellow. Abai shuddered as he read the verse. It seemed to speak directly to him. But what did it mean? Does it mean, he thought, that Krishna will take away all my money? Was that what was actually happening? Was that why his business plans were failing? He discussed the meaning of the verse with Sridhar Maharaj. Yes, Sridhar Maharaj confirmed, this might very well be what was happening between Lord Krishna and Abai. In July 1935, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati came to install the deity of Lord Krishna and to institute deity worship at the Bombay Centre. He was pleased with what his disciples had done so far, and Bhakti Saranga Maharaj admitted that much of the work was due to Abai Babu, who had collected funds and established a new centre. Why is Abai living separately? Bhakti Saranga asked. He should be president of this Bombay Centre. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati replied, it is better that he is living outside your company. He will do. When the time comes, he will do everything himself. You don't have to recommend him. Abai had not been present when this was spoken, but his godbrothers told him what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had said. These words of his spiritual master, with their mysteriously prophetic air, were important to Abai. He treasured the words within himself and meditated upon their meaning. In November 1935, he was again with his spiritual master in Vrindavan. It was the Kartik season, the ideal time to visit Vrindavan, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was staying for a month with his disciples at peaceful Radha Kund, the sacred lake where Radha and Krishna used to sport. After leaving Bombay in July, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had gone to Calcutta, where he had spoken on radio, delivered many public lectures, welcomed back the preachers he had sent to Europe, and finished publishing his Srimad Bhagavatam translation and commentary. Then in October, he had come to Radha Kund. Occupying the small one-story house Bhaktivinoda Thakur had constructed, he had been reading and speaking to the assembled devotees on the Upanishads, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Srimad Bhagavatam. He had also installed deities at Sri Kunja Vihari Math. The banks of Radhakund were overhung with bright green foliage growing from the gnarled branches of ancient tamarind, tamal, and neem trees. In the shallows of the water, cranes stood on stilt-like legs, while river terns skimmed across the lake, sometimes abruptly diving for fish. Sometimes a tortoise would poke its nose up from the water's depth, or a fish would jump. Green parrots, usually in pairs, flew in and out of the green trees, and sparrows chirped and hopped from place to place. Peacocks were also there, mostly in nearby gardens, as were occasional rabbits and even deer. The atmosphere was enriched with the history of Krishna Lila. 5,000 years ago, Radha and Krishna had engaged in transcendental pastimes here, and only 500 years ago, Lord Chaitanya had rediscovered Radha Kund. Lord Chaitanya's great follower Raghunath Das Goswami had resided here for many years, constantly chanting Hare Krishna and discussing the activities of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And here in a small bhajan kutir, Krishnadas Kaviraj had written Chaitanya Charitamrita, the narrative of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati relished so much. Many of the inhabitants at Radhakund were Babajis, living in small bhajan kutirs and spending their time chanting Hare Krishna. Having heard of his spiritual master's stay here, Abai, bringing his son with him, had travelled from Bombay just to have darshan of his spiritual master. To see Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was always an occasion for jubilation, but to see him in Vrindavan was an added perfection. This meeting with his beloved guide and friend was different from the time in 1932 when Abai had seen him on the Vrindavan Parikrama. Now Abai was no longer sitting anonymously in the back of a room. Now he was a bona fide disciple, recognized as the Kavi, who had written the praiseworthy poem and essay, the young man who listened well, the devotee who had helped the Allahabad mat and who had established the mat in Bombay. Already on this visit, Abai had had occasion to be alone with his spiritual master, who had remembered Abai's son and presented him with a small bandi jacket. And now, as they walked together alone on the bank of Radhakund, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta turned and spoke confidently to Abai. There had been some quarrelling amongst his leading disciples in Calcutta, he said, and this distressed him very much. Even now in Vrindavan it weighed heavily on his mind. Some of his disciples had been fighting over who would use various rooms and facilities at the Gaudiya Math headquarters in Calcutta. These devotees were all members of the same mat, and the building was for propagating Krishna consciousness under the leadership of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Yet even in their spiritual master's presence, they were quarrelling. Brahmanas and Vaishnavas were supposed to be free from envy of any creature, or to speak of envy of one another. If they were to fight now, what would they do after their spiritual master had passed away? Abai had no part in these matters, and did not even know the details or who was involved. But as he listened to his spiritual master, he also became distressed. Deeply concerned, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said to Abai, Agun Dvalbe, there will be fire. One day there would be fire in the Calcutta Gaudiya Math, and that fire of party interests would spread and destroy. Abai heard, but did not know what to make of it. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had fought so long and boldly to establish that anyone of any birth could be elevated to become a Brahmana, a sannyasi, or a Vaishnava. But if his followers became contaminated by a little wealth and the desire for prestige, thereby showing themselves to be still low-class men, despite their training and purification, then his mission would be disrupted. If in the name of religion they became attached to ease, position, and prestige, it could only mean that they had failed to grasp the teachings of their spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada, he was lamenting that these men were simply after the stones and bricks of the building. He condemned. He was very, very sorry. When we were living in a rented house, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, if we could collect 200 or 300 rupees, we were living very nicely at Ultadanga. We were happier then. But since we have been given this marble palace in Bagh Bazaar, there is friction between our men. Who will occupy this room? Who will occupy that room? Who will be the proprietor of this room? Everyone is planning in different ways. It would be better to take the marble from the walls and secure money. If I could do this and print books, that would be better. Abai felt his spiritual master speaking to him in urgency, as if asking him for help or warning him to avert a disaster. But what could he do? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta then said directly to Abai, Ama icha chila kitchu bai karana. I had a desire to print some books. If you ever get money, print books. Standing by Radhakund and beholding his spiritual master, Abai felt the words deeply enter his own life. If you ever get money, print books.
December 1936. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was in poor health at Jagannath Puri. Abai was in Bombay, and he wanted to write his Guru Maharaj a letter. He is a little kind upon me, Abhay thought. He will understand my request. And he began to write. Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances at your lotus feet. You have got many disciples, and I am one of them, but they are doing direct service to you. Some of them are brahmacharis, some of them are sannyasis, but I am a householder. I cannot. Sometimes I give monetary help, while I cannot give you direct service. Is there any particular service I can do? 2 weeks later, Abhay received a reply. I am fully confident that you can explain in English our thoughts and arguments to the people who are not conversant with the languages of the other members. This will do much good to yourself as well as your audience. I have every hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher if you serve the mission to inculcate the novel impression of Lord Chaitanya's teachings in the people in general, as well as for philosophers and religionists. Abhay at once recognized this to be the same instruction he had received at their very first meeting in 1922. He took it as confirmation. There was now no doubt as to his purpose of his life. What his spiritual master had said in Calcutta in 1922 had not been a chance remark, nor had that been a chance meeting. The instruction was the same. Turn yourself into a very good English preacher. This will do much good to yourself as well as your audience. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta passed away from the mortal world in January 1st, 1937. He had been spending his last days reading Chaitanya Charitamrita and chanting on his beads. When a doctor had visited him wanting to give him an injection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had protested. Why are you disturbing me in this way? Simply chant Hare Krishna, that's all. Amongst his last words to his disciples were, I advise all to preach the teachings of Rupa Raghunath, disciples of Lord Chaitanya, with all energy and resources. Our ultimate goal shall be to become the dust of the lotus feet of Sri Sri Rupa and Raghunath Goswamis. You should all work conjointly under the guidance of your spiritual master, with a view to serve the absolute knowledge, the personality of Godhead. You should live somehow or other without any quarrel in this mortal world, only for the service of Godhead. Do not, please, give up the service of Godhead, in spite of all dangers, all criticisms, and all discomforts. Do not be disappointed, for most people in the world do not serve the personality of Godhead. Do not give up your own service, which is your everything and all. Neither reject the process of chanting and hearing of the transcendental holy name of Godhead. You should always chant the transcendental name of Godhead with patience and forbearance like a tree and humbleness like a straw. There are many amongst you who are well qualified and able workers. We have no other desire whatsoever. In his last days, he had remained fully conscious and had given instructions until the end. He had specifically and openly ordered that the affairs of his Gaudiya Mat be maintained by a 12-man governing body, which the devotees should select amongst themselves. Finally, he had said, Please accept my blessings to you all, present and absent. Please bear in mind that our sole duty and religion is to spread and propagate service to the Lord and of his devotees. At 5:30 a.m. on January 1st, he breathed his last. Word very soon reached Abhay in Bombay. His immediate response was to cry with grief. No more the joy of an anticipated meeting, no more trips to Calcutta or Vrindavan on the plea of business, just to see the tall, commanding form of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, the evangelic angel. This sense of never meeting again was difficult to bear. Philosophically, Abhay knew that there was no reason to lament. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had come into the world to execute the mission of Lord Chaitanya. and now it was required that he leave this place and go to another, where he would again engage in the same activity. Yet even armed with this philosophy, Abai felt all alone. His two great well-wishers were gone, his father and now his spiritual master. But he felt grateful that he had received a special mercy, final instruction, just 2 weeks before his spiritual master's departure. Abai read his letter again and again. There would not be another. The intimate talks and meetings were now gone. But by this letter especially, Abai would live in the instructions of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. The letter had come just in time. Now he knew for certain, no matter what anyone else said, how to please his spiritual master and stay linked with Krishna. Following his order, he would conquer the feeling of loss at the disappearance of his most affectionate well-wisher.
Hare Krishna. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
So if anyone has any thoughts, comments, reflections, now's the time. Thanks, Hema and Mahamantra, for reading.
No worries, I enjoy it. I wrote down jotted down a few points as I was going through, and they kind of seem to link up in the end. Yeah, it's kind of Srila Prabhupada mentions, it describes what a Sangha group should be. You know, like, a talk on Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam and some prasad. You know what there is in a Sangha group. But yeah, so I'm really looking forward to once my house is done up and ready to move into. That's my main aim, is to have a small Sangha group, and I kind of prayed for it years ago. One of my first times to India, I went to Calcutta, when I went to the Mullik's place in Calcutta, and I sort of prayed to the deities that Prabhupada used to pray to and serve, that I can be a good preacher, or be a preacher anyway. And so it's kind of slowly starting to happen. So I thought maybe some of these experiences, that I've had in the past previously, I can put to good use as well, with just, because a lot of people are coming to us because they've been suffering. So I can kind of relate to a lot of those, and kind of got the answer as well, and can sort of show where I was and where I am now, and I can maybe be a good role model as well as preacher. So actually, as a kid, I was, one of my weird things was, I want to be a vicar. Who wishes to be a vicar? But maybe I'm being let to be a Vaishnava vicar. So I think that's about it. That's about it, really. Yeah, they just kind of all linked together with Sangha group and preaching, and so yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Amazing, thanks, Prabhu. Whereabouts is your new house going to be?
It's not too far from where I am now. It's about 15 miles from Derby,
Okay.
5 miles from Burton-on-Trent. So,
okay. Yeah. Great, amazing.
Yeah, I shall invite you both to my inaugural night.
Brilliant. We've been to Derby.
Have we? When?
We went to an interfaith.
Yeah.
We were asked to represent Canterbury. We're part of the local interfaith group on the council here of that group, and we were asked to represent. Someone had to represent Canterbury at the National Interfaith Conference or something.
Yeah.
It was held at the conference.
Was it one at the university, or?
It was at Derby County Football Club, Pride Park.
Oh.
And it was and it was like in the conference suite. They'd hired out. They obviously have like corporate spaces at the football club or something. Yeah. And so we ended up getting a train to Derby.
I've forgotten all about that.
And spending the day there, oddly enough. But and I also went to a summer school in Repton.
Oh yeah, that's only like 3 miles from where I am now.
Really?
Repton. Yeah, go there quite often. Yeah, not to school, but
I spent a couple of weeks at Repton school.
yeah.
Because I hadn't really done much work and I had exams to pass, so they packed me off to this summer school to try and sort of get me ready for these exams because I was going to fail. But apart from that, I'd love to make it a hat trick and visit to Derby. That would be
That'd be fun. A road trip. We love road trips.
We're big on road trips. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I also thought it was amazing when you heard that program, right? If you just read a bit of Bhagavad Gita, you chant Hare Krishna, have some prasadam, it's like that didn't start 20 or 50 years ago or something, you know? It's like this eternal thing, you know? Prabhupada was doing it almost 100 years ago.
And even before then as well, in the Mayapur area, so not Bhaktisiddhanta, but back to Vinod Thakur, he started all the sang groups, didn't he? And some of them are still going.
Yeah, every time we go to Mayapur, we always go back to Vinod Thakur's place, and it's kind of not advertised, but you know, it's where the Namahatta began, sort of thing, or where he spread the Namahatta from was from that. So we always go there and say some prayers, you know. Yeah, and I know also Kripa Moya Prabhu, he's a big sort of proponent of this. He has this Facebook group. I don't know if you're in it, but it's called ISKCON Small Groups.
It's really good, very inspiring.
And so he's really big on that actually, you know, in every town you only need a kind of like a living room, you know, enough space for sort of 10 people or 5 people or whatever, or 3 people even, doesn't really matter. And you just sit down and make that sound vibration, and that's it. That's all you need, isn't it? So it's you can only imagine, it's such an easy thing to do. You can only imagine if you know, even 1% of the devotees did it. Just invite all your friends. How many groups would there be? It's phenomenal, you know. We heard Bhaktivinoda Thakur had 400 Namahattas under his guidance. Program. He was like kind of overseeing 400. I don't know how he was doing that.
Yeah, I bet it's similar in my book, or with like Jayapataka Swami, this disciple. I think they do a lot of Namahattas and Sanghas and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's brilliant, and I think it's easier than having a temple. No
overheads and
no, exactly. You're already living somewhere. You've already got a building, so you might as well just do that.
It's possibly like it's slightly more risky, and it's like I can't really publicly advertise it because I don't want anyone and everyone turning up. So it'll be like kind of word of mouth to start off with, and and maybe like get friends of friends or something.
Yeah. I mean, we've found, and I'm sure you know this anyway, but I know, and when I was in Brighton, I remember Dina saying to me, actually, anything over 12, this was just in his experience, anything over 12, and it can start, you run the risk of it being almost a bit impersonal. And we found that you can have 30 people coming to a program in a community centre, but it can actually be quite hard to cultivate personal relationships with that. So just even having 5 or 10, if you can get really deep together, that actually works. Obviously, having 100 people doing kirtan at a festival is like, it's all good, isn't it? But it's nice to be able to sort of go deep with each other. Yeah. As one thing that struck me reading that was actually how powerful. What I keep thinking reading this actually, the key is how simple Krishna consciousness is. It is so simple. And I think that the hardest thing I find is just keeping to a very simple program, you know, like you don't
read and chant.
You just need to read and chant and offer some food, and then and just get other people to join in, and it's the depth of what you do is the real potency sort of thing. And I was just thinking, like, one instruction from his spiritual master, basically 1 or 2 instructions, one preach in English and one to print books, which are kind of like one instruction, you know, basically they kind of go together. and that's all he had. And on that, he kind of extrapolated on it, you know. And you think, wow, that's so. It's just that one thing can have so much potency if you, I guess, if it's spoken with potency and received the right way, it actually becomes your life. Then what to do? Yeah, it's just incredible that you don't have to. You didn't have to go and study for, 10 years or to go to whatever seminary school, and like that. He just kind of accepted that one instruction and then was empowered to go and do so many things. It's just incredible.
I would like to have a book table as well at some point in the local town, or maybe travel a bit slightly further out. So my local small town is, I don't know if I'm just being snobby, but I don't think there would be many takers of the spiritual kind of enlightenment. So, but I'd still like to have a table that I could set up somewhere, or maybe go to some local festivals of leisure on the park and that sort of thing. Especially if I've got a sangha set up and a bit of a title for it, then I can get a banner and things and advertise it slightly more.
Yeah,
talking to people.
Book tables are fun. We do book tables quite a bit here, and
it's not as confrontational. People just come up to you. It's what the Jehovah's Witnesses do now. They don't do door to door hardly. They've got the book cart, and people come and speak to them.
Yeah. We notice it with our book table as well. It's great. It's really good fun.
It's a nice way of meeting people. We've met a few people.
Quite a few, yeah. And it's also a nice way of, when people are relatively new, and you want to kind of engage them, because book distribution is so ecstatic. When people get a taste of doing book distribution, then people think that kirtan's good, or whatever, and then you go out and distribute a few Bhagavad Gitas, and you're like, wow, it's a whole new level, it's like, wow. But when to invite someone to go and stand on the street, that takes a certain kind of mentality or whatever, but to actually stand behind a table or to hang out behind a book table, actually
there's a nice barrier between you and the other person. So it's psychological or whatever, but
easier for us, and it's actually easier for other people to come and help you as well, which is good. And
I've got a devotee from Sheffield, Jai Krishna Prabhu. He said he'll come over and help me out, and got offers of Dira Bhakta as well. He's coming over and help me from Wales, and there's the Blackpool group as well. They're going to help out. So
fantastic! Oh man, that's so much nectar. That's brilliant.
Yeah, networking.
Yeah. It's great. It's amazing that once you. I mean, we had a similar experience that we just decided, right, we're going to go and just set up a program somewhere.
Yeah.
And you sort of think, well, okay, we'll do it and just depend on Krishna. But as soon as you do it, all the devotees come out and everyone wants to, and help out. And Krishna really reciprocates, doesn't he? It's really nice. Yeah. It's great. Oh, ecstatic. We'd love to come.
Yeah.
That'd be great fun.
You're on the guest list for the first one. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I'll let you know well in advance.
Fantastic. Amazing. Okay. Well, maybe we should wrap it up. Anything else?
No, that sort of was in line with what I was thinking as well about it. Yeah. I think that sums it up nicely.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, I think next week the next chapter is called The War.
Whoa.
So I think it's going to get tasty. Yeah. Great. All right. Brilliant. Thanks so much for your association, Prabhu. Thank you.
When's the next one? Is it tomorrow? Tomorrow
on Facebook. Yeah, 6:30. Yeah.
I'll come for the start of it. I think I've got another choir thing. It seems to clash at the moment, but I'll log in and say hello.
Brilliant. Thanks, Prabhu. Can't wait. Okay. Have a great evening. See you tomorrow.
Nice to speak to you and everything else.
Hare Krishna. You too. Thanks, Prabhu. Hare Bol.
Hare Bol.